Welcome to Final Fantasy Weekly. I'm Drew Rice-Kriesman.
And I'm Ira Kriesman.
And on this episode, we continue our conversation on Final Fantasy Tactics. When last we left our heroes, it was a little while ago, so we got to get Big caught up. We're right in the middle of a big thing, too. So it's an interesting place to leave people hanging for a minute. But we're in the middle of, or I guess in the leading up to, in all of the preparation stages for this enormous battle that is meant to decide the War of the Lions taking place at Fort Bessot. And I'll say here at the beginning, Ira, this is one of those few critiques I have of and it's not really of the game or of the story itself. I think given the technological limitations, they did the best they could. But you and I were talking about this a little bit about maps on the Lord of the Rings episode on the other channel, and it can be difficult to place a lot of this geographically. And I think when I first played this game, I didn't really have a full understanding that all of these events that we're talking about kind of are taking place at the same time, but in different places while there's this huge event happening. Some of that can get a little bit lost. And it's one of the reasons why I'd really love to see this game either remade, or as we've talked about a lot of times, why it would be phenomenal as a translation into a television show or a series of films, because you could get that point across, I think, with a bit more punch. So indeed, again, when last we left our heroes, well, they weren't really heroes. When last we left the story, Dycedarg of House Baelv, the eldest of House Baelv, was murdering Duke Larg, the leader of the northern half of the country.
Right.
And, his brother Zalbog, who we were talking about before we came on here, no love lost for Zalbog, who ordered the murder of Tetra.
Right. Because several times, especially in the last, and in the next several scenes in which he is involved, I'm kind of on his side. I have to remind myself, he ordered Argath to kill Tetra. Right. He didn't do it himself, but he basically murdered her. So, no, and he never apologizes. He never atones. He never feels bad about it. So no redemption arc for Zalbag, but I do kind of feel for him.
Yeah, and it's just interesting that even for him, this is a step too far, right? That he's clearly willing to do lots of dirty things, get his hands dirty, in order to achieve certain ends, but he at least drew the line at murdering essentially their king. They don't really use that word, but yeah. But before Larg can completely succumb, he does twist the knife back a little bit, but metaphorically, because he's getting the actual twisting of the knife.
Right.
But he tells Zalbog that it was Dycedarg who killed their father, and not this malady that keeps getting blamed for everyone's death and has killed literally 0 people in the story. So on the other side of Fort Bessot, again, it's difficult to say exactly how far away, again, the geography of all of this is a little ambiguous, but somewhere nearby, their youngest brother, Ramza, who has long forsaken his family name and has been fighting against them for quite some time, but still, is there, remember, he came to meet up with Orlandu, trying to stop all of this before it happened. When he arrived, he learned that the Count Sidolphus Orlandu has been thrown in prison, and so this is turned into a prison escape. But before they can do that, Ramza's got to try to stop this giant battle from happening right this second. And he comes up with a pretty clever solution that actually works for once.
Yeah. Well done, Ramza. So Fort Bessot is at the site of a big old dam. Holding back this river makes a lake, as dams do. And Ramza realizes, well, the southern sky is on the south half of this little vale, and the northern sky is on the northern half of this vale. And if I open the sluice, it will flood the plain in between, and it's going to be really hard to wage a giant battle if the plain is flooded. So that's what he does. He and his crew go to the sluice. They meet some resistance. They beat the bad guys. They open the sluice, and the plain is flooded. And so this giant battle that was going to happen now can't. And remember from last episode, the Southern Sky was going to have the advantage because they had released the poison, that moss fungus.
Yeah.
The word's in here somewhere. Yeah, so they had released like a less deadly version of it, so it would enfeeble the Northern Sky but not kill them. Then the Southern Sky could go in and kill them, and Goltana would have the advantage. So now no one's got the advantage because now we can't fight.
Right. And you might think that, well, the Southern Sky still has the advantage, right? Because the Northern Sky's leader was just murdered. But hold that thought.
We're going to get there.
Well, again, and last episode, Delita explained exactly what was going to happen, and it does. So, so if you remember that, but anyway, we'll get there. But it's prison break time, and so we're inside with Ramza and Oran, and remember that young woman, Valmafra, who's kind of a spy / maybe friend of Delita / maybe just spying on him for the church. And we've snuck inside the castle, and it's time to break out Orlandu.
And they didn't even put him in a prison. Remember, he was arrested, but this doesn't look like a prison cell. This looks like an old basement.
And they threw him downstairs for a minute.
Yeah. Some crates.
Yeah.
All right, fine.
And I really like this exchange. As simple as it is, this is one of those universal things. I think this is something that just everybody has gone through this in their life when they knew someone, or someone rather knew them when you were a baby, right? When you were a little kid, and you're not going to know them, but they know you. And that's basically what goes on here, where Orlandu says, you must be Ramza. And Ramza goes, have we met? And he says, yeah. You were only a child of some 3 or 4 years at the time. And he says, you gave us all quite a fright trying to lift my sword. And just in this moment where there's so much death and destruction and all of these serious things going on, the idea of them being afraid that the young Beowulf boy was trying to pick up a sword is just, I don't know, endlessly endearing for some reason.
It is quite sweet. I also think it's interesting that Oran refers to his adopted father as Count Orlandu, my lord. I think he's being overly formal, but it's kind of nice. It's sweet in a way.
Yeah, there's that fine line, right, between the guy who calls his dad sir at school or whatever, but
Sure,
also but different times, and yeah, I agree. I think there's something very respectful about that. Orlandu does this great thing where he kind of lets everybody off the hook, and he says, hey, you've come to rescue me. There's no need to kneel. There's no, I'm doing all this. I remember you from when you were a baby, but I'm the one in jail. You're the one rescuing me, right? Mm-hmm. So come on, folks, So Oran explains that the battle is ended with only light casualties on either side, thanks to Ramza and his companions. And Orlandu is excited about that, and for the 5th time in this story, somebody says, you remind me of Barbaneth, young Ramza.
Yeah.
Dad would be proud and all that stuff. And Ramza tries to play it off. I only do what needs to be done. And that just makes it that much further for Orlandu. He goes, your likeness to Barbaneth is more than skin deep. Your deeds honor him, boy.
So with the friendship between Orlandu and Barbaneth, I have to wonder if the whole civil war might have been averted had Barbaneth had not fallen to malady, as it were.
As it were, yeah. It's interesting, in the Discord the other day, we were talking about potential sequels or prequels or expanded editions of any given Final Fantasy game, and I'm only just now realizing that in a lot of ways this story, parallels what we've talked about with Final Fantasy V. It's huge in Final Fantasy 15, right? You remember that picture of Dad and his friends on their journey. And I would play the hell out of Final Fantasy Tactics, the 50 Years' War, and the story of Barbaneth and a younger version of Sidolphus Orlandu and all these other players from that war. I think the prequel would be really interesting.
Absolutely. Getting to see Larg and Goltana maybe working together.
Right. They would have been allies at the time.
Mm-hmm. Where does the Template fit into all this?
Yeah.
Plus, it's worth remembering we basically only ever see the continent of Ivalis in these games.
Right.
And so what's the rest of the world like?
Right. Then Valmafra interrupts, because as much as this reunion is all very cute and stuff, she says, "Pray, forgive my interruption. But Duke Gultana means to execute your excellency on the morrow. We should waste no time in fleeing." Like, what are we doing standing here talking? Let's get out. And Oran says, that's true, man. We got to go. And Orlandu says, and remember, it's been very difficult for him to break his honor and to do these things. Right? He was the one saying, as much as he was arguing against stopping the war, or arguing for stopping the war, he was still going to do what Gultana ordered him to do. So that it's come to this is brutal for him. But he says, the hour of this war's end will not be long in coming. Until it does, I mean to travel with Ramza. We must put a stop to the High Confessor's plans. So now he's got nothing left to do. He's got to stop the bigger thing, where before he was just trying to play his part. He's got no other choice now. And Oran agrees to go along, but Orlandu says, no, you must go to Zeltenia and see the safety of Lady Ovelia.
Yeah, it's a bummer that Oran doesn't get to come with the group. I really wanted Oran to join up, and he doesn't. But I think it's worth noting that Orlandu is still buying into we've got a rightful queen.
Yeah.
Like, we're all still sort of in on the royal blood means that they get to rule thing, as if that hasn't been made such a farce of for the entire story. So it's interesting to see how these characters are not yet ready to, vote in their representatives,
right,
so to speak, right? Like they're not ready to totally burn down the entire system, and maybe they just don't have a concept for what a new system would be.
Sure, right. I guess in his understanding of it, Ovelia seems like a pretty good person, so let's at the very least make that happen. But you're right, he just doesn't. He's still hanging on to some rules and some traditions. But yeah, it's like, I guess that's all he's got, right? So now again, in some other area inside the fort, again, it's hard to tell exactly where in relation to the other scenes that we have seen. But we find Gultana in a very important looking room, because that's where important people stand, is important rooms. And they shout things indiscriminately at whoever's around them about how they suffer a plague of fools. That's what he's doing. And Delita enters the room and says, "You called for me, Excellency," and kneels and all of that. And again, if you remember what Delita told us he planned to do, this is extraordinary watching it. If you've seen it before, it's extraordinary watching it. And if you've just kind of forgotten what's going to happen here, boy, is this just shockingly intense. But Gultana starts, delivering the orders. You go get the soldiers, move against the northern sky at once. And Delita's like, pond outside, buddy.
Yeah. And remember, this is exactly what Delita wanted Ramza to do, right? Like, he's moving Ramza around the chessboard also, even though he got mad when Valmafra said something to that effect.
And then Gultana says, "What's sauce for the goose is sauce for the gander. This is an opportunity we cannot let pass. They will not be expecting an attack. If they slip away now, who can say how long this war may drag on?" And Delita says, "I must refuse." And again, if you've been living inside this world for a while, it's like, I'm sorry, what? Which is exactly Gultana's response. Refuse. Like, that is not how this works, right? And then Delita just stands up, takes out his blade, and very casually pierces him right through the chest. Just, boom. Like, no fanfare, no speech, he just takes out his sword and kills Duke Gultana, whose response of, "How dare you?" Again, it kind of speaks to what you were talking about, right? He can't even conceive that someone would kill him in this way, or that someone would disrespect or dishonor him or not understand how important he is or whatever it is. Like, he just can't even believe it. And Delita says, no man would wish to see you king. So he did get some words out.
And I think your observation about Goltana is interesting, because I feel like we saw that with Sephiroth also at his end, right? Like he couldn't believe that Cloud would be able to take him out. I feel like Kefka had a similar reaction. Like, there's these ants dare to climb my tower.
Right.
I think we see that over and President Shinra too, right? We see this over and over with these characters who just become so certain of their own importance, of their own power, that anybody would stand up to them is laughable to them.
So we mentioned the massacre that happened at the last time there was a big battle, and some of the graphic violence, as graphic as it could be for its time. And we get a little bit more of that here, where when Delita pulls his sword back out, Goltana like coughs up blood everywhere, and it's, man,
it's pretty gruesome.
Yeah. There's been some talk about Final Fantasy 16 is going to be M-rated, and why and to what effect. And I'm not expecting a bunch of F-bombs and sex, but things like this occasionally, especially given I think you've got a similar tone in that story just based on the trailers than we have here in Tactics. And boy, that just reminds me of stuff that Dad used to talk about. And I remember he would say it with regards to, probably because I was swearing all the time as a teenager, and he was like, an occasional swear can be a lot more effective than just saying the word all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like with graphic violence, that can often be the case too. There's not a lot in this game, but when you see blood, it's so kind of shocking, and it happens again here. And then we have this really weird scene where Valmafra comes in with somebody that it will be made clear here is it looks exactly like Orlandu, but it's somebody dressed as Cid Orlandu. And they come in the room, and Delita, like in very ceremonial terms, starts being like, know that your death will not be in vain. And this guy's like, the vanity would be in living when Saint Ajora calls me to his side. And it's like, whoa, what are we doing here?
Uh-huh.
And Delita kills that guy too.
Right. So the idea is to make it look like Orlandu and Goltana had a fight and they killed each other, leaving yet another power vacuum, right?
Yeah.
So, because they need Cid out of the way, even though, like, Delita doesn't necessarily want Cid dead, he does need Cid out of the way.
Yeah.
And so this is a way to do it. Now everybody's going to know that Thunder God Cid is dead, and that whoever this other guy who kind of looks like him, who might be hanging out with the heretic, it's obviously not him.
Right.
So that'll be so Goltana's dead, Larg's dead, Orlandu is air quotes dead. So that just leaves the Beowulf boys in a position of power.
Mm-hmm. So Valmafra says, again with no emotion, I'm reading the no emotion. I'm based on the context of the scene, like just such a casual execution it was. It was so casual. Right. And she says, the real Count Orlandu has escaped with Ramza. Delita says, then we can only hope that Ramza does not fail us. Remember several scenes ago when Ramza said, what game is it you play, Delita? Yeah. Well, we're getting there, right? Okay. And then we get another one of these sort of still images of the fort, and it's completely flooded, and it looks kind of more like a painting that you would see maybe of medieval warfare. Mm-hmm. And we get, obviously by the end, it's clear that this is Ramza speaking, or again, I think probably writing in his journal, and I do think that the historian who's telling the story must have found these pages of the journal, right? And it says, High Confessor Marcel came forward with his offer to mediate a peace between the camps. But though their leaders had been lost, their capacity to make war had not. The High Confessor's offer fell on deaf ears.
So the High Confessor, pious, good man that he is, offers to mediate a peace, but really we know, or we will know, that it's bullshit. He wants them to kill each other because he's trying to take power, right? The church, and especially the Template, are trying to take power in Ivalice. So, I'm just trying to help out. Yeah.
Yeah. And that it doesn't work. It's like, who are you going to mediate with? And we've talked a lot before about how Final Fantasy is really, really good at doing the very big and then juxtaposing it with the very small. And I love it here where, Ramza gives us 2 sentences on an update on the war. The High Confessor did this. The armies are still making war and wouldn't hear it. And he finishes, I made for Limberry. For Alma.
And that's part of why I keep saying that the War of the Lions isn't really what this story is about.
Right. Sort of like how Lord of the Rings isn't about the Lord of the Rings.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it's important. It's there. It shapes everything. It influences everything. But for Ramza's story is about, how do I protect the people I love the best I can? Because everything else is fucked, and I can only do so much to influence and stop that.
So now we scene transition to some of the few people left with real power. It's getting ugly out there, but... So again, part of the ambiguity of this story is not quite sure how much time has passed, but we're back at Igros Castle, the Beowulfmanse, the home of Dycedarg, and he is apparently entertaining Loffrey of the Knights Templar, who you'll recall was the person who recruited Wygraf into this entire mess, eventually getting him turned into a monster and killed.
I wonder what his plan is here.
And they're having one of these chess conversations where they're talking about something, but they're really talking about something else, and they both know the other thing that they're talking about, but they're still
Right.
kind of keeping up some fakeness. It's really fascinating how layered these things are. And so Loffrey says, so you're unwilling to compromise on your position. And Dycedarg says, Ivalice's reunification under its rightful king was his grace's most fervent wish. We've no intention of lying down arms until Prince Orlandu sits the throne that is his birthright. You will not steer the helm of Ivalice at your own pleasure, not so long as this house stands. Remember that Orlandu is a baby.
Yeah, he's like 2 years old. Yeah. King toddler.
Yeah.
What are we doing?
And Loffrey says, do you not know who made your assassination of the Duke possible? So Loffrey clearly knew what was going on.
Because it was a Templar who released the poison.
As much as I hate Dycedarg and everything he stands for and everything he does and his stupid face and his stupid thing and everything's stupid, I do love some of his quick-wittedness, his quick tongue sometimes, and I really enjoy this retort. I mislike the question.
I reject your premise.
Yeah, I want to start using that more. Like, I'm going to use that on Twitter. I'm going to say, you know what? I mislike the question. Says, Larg was felled by a southern assassin. Or do you mean to say that you were the ones who sent him?
Ooh.
Like, literally, the guy who we just saw stab the dude in the chest is now accusing somebody else of the thing we know he did. This is it's just incredible.
Yeah, it's the Uno reverse meme that I see on Twitter all the time.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, no you.
Yeah. Loffrey says, I'll not play this fool's game while actively and quite well playing this fool's game. Says, there is no convincing you then. Dycedarg, keeping up all the falsities, says, were it our desire, we could crush the Template like an overripe grape. Of that I am quite convinced.
Here we are crushing fruit again. Why? Just eat the fruit, man.
It's not what you're supposed to do with them. Now it's time for Loffrey's clever retort when he says, pray remove that fine white cloak beforehand. Burst grapes oft leave a fearsome stain. Get it? Because symbology.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Symbolism.
Yeah.
Right.
Says, tell me, this poison employed at Bessot, do you know what it was? Oh, now we're playing games. And for the first time all story, Dycedarg takes a moment.
Right.
Doesn't immediately have something to say. He doesn't already have the next move planned out. Isn't maybe expecting the conversation to go to, do you know what the poison was? Like, that's not, how is that relevant? But after a moment, he says, I believe it was an extract of moss fungus spores. And if this was an episode of Columbo, got him. But he doesn't know it yet, and we don't know it yet, quite what that has to do with anything. Loffrey says, so it was. An insidious thing, moss fungus. It takes a great quantity to kill a man, but the toxin never leaves the blood. The smallest, most undetectable of doses will prove lethal, if repeated often enough. Now Dycedarg says nothing, because he knows where Loffrey is going with this now. Loffrey says, even a learned eye must confuse the symptoms with those of common affliction. Oft as not, the person being poisoned is never even aware, and should they become so, it is almost invariably too late. Your Lord Father was taken by malady, was he not?
There's that word again.
Mm-hmm.
I imagine there is plenty of sickness in this world. Not a lot of washing of hands, wearing of face masks when necessary.
Sure.
But not everybody who dies of malady just had an illness, right? Some of them were poisoned. Probably the ones who have access to clean drinking water were more often poisoned than not. It's, man, what an accusation.
Dycedarg says to Loffrey and to you, dear sir, do you make some implication? Now, we know Larg said that Dycedarg did this thing, but Larg wasn't the most reliable source of anything either, right?
Right.
So now Loffrey is giving him the Columbo. He's breaking it down like a lawyer. He's walking through step by step, which is much more convincing. And he doesn't even respond to the do you make some implication. He just goes, I'm told you yourself have some knowledge of poison craft.
Right.
How odd.
What a coincidence.
So clearly Loffrey knows, and he's playing with his food.
So I've got a question for you. Like, they both know they're playing the game, so why continue to play, right?
Why are they doing this? Right.
Right. Loffrey's got another goal in mind. It's not just about, I know this thing. It's, I know this thing, and therefore, when I make my next move, which we're about to get to.
Right. So Dycedarg doesn't deny knowing poison craft, simply says, what of it? And Loffrey just continues where he was going anyway, saying, I recently learned an interesting fact. I had wondered if you might be aware of it. Moss fungus poisoning leaves spores in the body. When a victim is buried, they say toadstools sprout above the grave. This really is that scene in the lawyer drama where you're like, why are we talking about moss fungus? This whole time, everything's been about rations and war and the church and these baby kings and the princess who doesn't want to be a queen, who's maybe not even really a princess, and all these big ideas. And why are we talking about moss fungus right now?
Right.
But it's so well done because it's drawn attention to you. Like, this is... What the hell? And again, Dycedarg says nothing. Loffrey says, well, forgive me, I digress. There was, by the way, another matter, a gift from High Confessor Marcel. And then he takes out a zodiac stone. And he sets it on the table. Dude, again, knowing a little bit, and you can guess, we've seen what happens to everyone with these stones so far. Like, wow. Joffrey just in here to get this dude wrecked.
Right. So I know this thing about you. I know you murdered your father. Now, what I do with that information, who's to say? But here's a gift. Are you going to take it? You are going to take it, aren't you?
Yeah. Dycedarg says a gemstone. Joffrey says, it is a zodiac stone, a blessed crystal from Melande. The High Confessor wished you to have it. Please, accept it as a symbol of the church's good faith. Joffrey should be played by whoever voiced Arden Azunia in the...
No kidding.
Yeah. Just, please. And then, as often happens in these scenes, like, it'll end with the camera kind of panning up and giving us the indication that, the conversation continued, but that's all we really needed to hear or whatever. And it happens again here, but as the camera pans up and we leave the room, we see Zalbag outside, and he's been clearly listening the entire time.
Do you think Joffrey knew Zalbag was there?
Yes.
Yeah. Because again, the goal of the church is not to support the North or the South. The goal of the church is to take over.
Right. And now they're doing to the Beowulf brothers what they had done with Larg and Goltana. The goal was to drive a wedge between them. The whole performance was for Zalbag.
So that was one overt... He made the move of, I know what you did. Then he made the second move of, you're going to join us as I give you this gift of a aura sight. And then the third hidden move was, I'm going to set Zalbag against you.
Right. And in a scene where he mostly talked about moss fungus. That is genius writing.
Yeah, that's great.
So we pick up at Limberry Castle. Remember, where we believe that Elmdor is holding Alma, Ramza's sister. And Ramza has finally arrived. And as he gets there, it's one of those... It's a little quiet. Yeah.
Uh-huh.
A little too rough.
Too rough. God, we got to do that movie.
We will. Again, this word. I just like the word mislike. I think I'm going to start using it because Ramza says, I mislike this. Yeah. Me too, buddy. I mislike this. There's something familiar. Yes, the battle with Cuchulainn and with Bellius. Well, that's not good. Those were the times we fought the monsters.
Mm-hmm.
And then we hear a woman's voice from high above shouting, "Guests! Guests come to Limberry!" And she reveals herself, and it is Celia. You remember Elmdor rocks around with two badass, creepy as hell vampire assassin ladies?
Right, yeah.
And she says, "I'd begun to think you'd never arrive." And then we hear the other one. It's Letty, I think.
Mm-hmm. Celia and Letty.
Right. She says, "Such a waste that would have been. We've such a warm welcome planned. So we've been expecting you, but creepier."
Right, right.
And then Ramza says, "Oh, it's a trap!" And then we fight them, because it's a video game.
Right, right. But remember, we're following Ramza, right? Like, we just had that whole big scene between Joffrey and Dycedarg, but our goal is to rescue Alma and, like, get the hell out of here. So right. Ramza needs to go into the den of the demons, right? Like, we fight the demons and the assassin vampire ladies, but we got to keep going because we don't have Alma yet.
Right. And so, as Ramza is fighting his way on the outer walls and trying to get into the castle, we see now inside with two of the cult leaders, two of the people who have really been pulling the strings the most from behind the scenes. I mentioned earlier that Dycedarg and Joffrey were two people remaining with power, but actually compared to these guys, very little control over what's been going on.
Right. Speaking of the manipulative and the subservient.
Right. And so Elmdor and Falmarv are speaking, and this is really the first time through all of this that we've seen the conspiracy, right? We really see the cult doing their thing and speaking without any of the games and without any of the different language. It's just Bellias and Cuchulainn defeated. We are all that's left, We and a Dramalek, who waits trapped in the rift. These cultists always, well, like,
Right.
y'all sound not so bananas, you know that?
But there really is a rift, and there really are monsters there who can be let
Right.
out with gemstones.
Right.
Like, it's there. It exists in this world.
Falmarv says, do not worry over a Dramalek. He will join us ere long. Elmdor says, you've found a host? Falmarv says, not I. The stone. The stone chooses the flesh, as it was with us. Creepy ass people, man. They wear the hoods and everything, like we should have known.
They do, yeah.
So, Elmdor says, of course. Then all that remains is the revival of the Master. Isn't that always what always remains with you people? Hey, what do you mean, you people?
Yeah. Ugh.
Master summoning cultists is what I mean. He says, once that is done, we will have no need of Oracite, nor of the vessels. We will come and go as we please. Do we have a host for the High Seraph? Do not tell me it is that girl.
Which girl, Drew? Which girl do you think it's going to be?
Which one? Why is it always... I guess that it is a symbol for misogyny, isn't it? It's always the young girl.
Right.
Done anything wrong.
Yeah.
Falmarv says, there is but one host fit for the High Seraph. The girl is the chosen. Now, we need only find the way to the Necrohall and to the High Seraph's soul. Man, y'all... Okay.
Yeah.
But, so it's interesting, we were talking earlier about Orlandu and which of the rules and traditions is he holding on to and which is he finally willing to let go. And I think it's interesting that Elmdor, sort of twice here is looking down upon potential hosts. And again, without them really saying it, you get the sense like, some peasant girl? Really? Like, he's on that. Still, given everything he's seen and given the fact that he's like part holy demon, but Falmarv is the one who has to set him straight and be like, the stone chooses, the girl has been chosen. None of that matters, you numbskull.
Right. So how much of the Lucavi's personality is the Lucavi's, and how much of it is influenced by their host, the human?
Right.
Right? And so, and do they sort of merge sensibilities, or was Elmdor's Lucavi always kind of a classist asshole? I don't know, but that is interesting that even amongst the Lucavi possessed nobility, some of them still hold to the idea of nobility. Right.
For all Falmarv has been absolutely awful throughout all of this, I do love the way he just like, this is how it is, man. You understand none of that matters, right? So the vampire assassin girls teleport into the room and say, Ramza's here. So Elmdor heads off to fight him, and Falmarv says, do not take light of him. He is a worthy foe. Not even Belias could stand before him. So at least somebody's finally learned that Ramza's really good in battle.
Right, right.
And Elmdor basically says, don't worry, I'll be fine.
Yeah. And also, you've got more important things to worry about, Falmarv.
Yeah.
Go find the Necrohall, which sounds like a scary place.
Right.
It's interesting how sometimes, like, the words that we come up with for fantasy fiction are just very obvious.
Right.
Like, we've got the Lucavi, and we've got all this elevated language. We've also got the Necrohall.
Right.
Like, the Hall of Deadness.
Right.
or like Lord of the Rings, right? Like, how many languages did Professor Tolkien come up with? But also, the big, bad, scary mountain is Mount Doom. It's just Mount Doom.
Just Mount Doom. Good point. Oh, that's funny.
Sometimes it's just obvious. Like, people give George Lucas shit for death sticks, but sometimes it's just Mount Doom. It's okay.
Right, totally. Elmdor teleports into another room of the castle where Ramza has broken in and says, at last, the hour of my retribution is come. Because Ramza sort of has bested him a couple of times. Not in full battle yet. We haven't really faced off against him, but keep getting the better of him. Ramza's not interested in any of that. He says, you killed my father, you stole my elephant. No, that's a different movie. He says, where did you hide my sister? Elmdor says, questions are the right of the victor, Ramza. Fair enough, I suppose.
So if I kill you, will you answer my question? What do you...
Yeah,
what? Come on.
I don't know. You guys are holding loose to your rules and stuff here. So, once again, and I do appreciate that. I'm not even going to make bones about it. The script points out to me here that for a number of times in this story now, somebody who once Ramza has saved their life has gone out of their way to save his life. Now he's found himself against them in battle. Has to take that life away.
Yep.
But after defeating Elmdor in battle with the assassins, they teleport away with Elmdor saying some weird creepy stuff about a fragile shell of flesh. Okay. Says, I await you in the Undercroft. To your point. Oh, I wonder if that's a super happy fun place, the Undercroft. And he says, it is there your darling sister sleeps. There's more RPG fighting and hacking and slashing on our way down into the Undercroft. And while making our way, suddenly we hear a mysterious yet familiar voice. And you wouldn't know that. Again, this is in our retelling of. You'd hear the voice. You'd recognize it maybe. It's been a while. And we hear, you'll not enter the Undercroft on my watch. The way is shut. Ramza says, who speaks? Reveal yourself. And the man's voice says, naive as ever, I see. Person teleports in, and it's Argath.
This fucking asshole again. Fuck this guy.
Argath.
I see Jorah's ass.
And so, this guy who actually pulled the trigger on killing Delita's sister and setting a whole lot of this stuff in motion has come back from the dead and says, to think my luck so fair that we would chance to meet again. Which I think is straight out of one of the Shakespeare's, but I can't remember one. But I'm pretty sure that's a direct quote. And Ramza's like, look, I've seen some weird shit.
Right. But dead people usually stay dead.
This is the first one of these.
Yeah. Well, now he's run into some ghosts from the 50 Years' War and stuff. So,
ghosts and stuff. But Argath appears to be flesh and blood. Man.
So he does. Yeah.
He says, dead. Oh, Ramza. Your mind's as common as your friends.
Oh,
right back into it with this guy.
Still. Comes back from the dead and he's still worried about whose father is who. And gee, Christmas, come on.
I did not die. I was reborn, chosen by a greater power. I did not fall before, nor shall I hear. The fate belongs to you. Bruh. And then he does the ultimate kill. He does the Frost King thing where he puts out his hands and all the demons rise up to his side. And then he calls them maggots because,
of course,
again, that's what they think of the little
Yeah, because these guys, again, they cannot fathom that anybody would be able to stand against them. Right. Or even have the temerity to do so.
And then Ramza gives him the line of dialogue he never could before. Back when they knew each other the first time, Ramza didn't have this in him. He's been through a lot. He's far more confident in his world perspective and his worldview. He is not, as Argath said before, the naive child that he has been before, that he very much was at the beginning of the story. And this might be Ramza's best line of the game to this point, maybe the whole time, because he gets him on both ends. If you remember, before I say that Argath's, sob story was that his grandfather was an embarrassment to the family and somebody who, kind of stopped their house from being noble, and he had done all these ill deeds, and that Argath intended to restore the nobility and dignity of his house, right? And so Ramza says, I see your soul is bartered as well. Your grandsire would be proud.
Nice.
Like, hit him where it hurts, dude. Argath says, how dare you? You pampered and coddled from the earliest days, what do you know of our affairs, of being made to toil for another's pleasure, near without reward, being tread upon by the peasant filth, struggling endlessly to rise back to your feet? What do you know of this? I'll purge this kingdom of all who once dared to look down on me. There is no place in the world for the meager. Ugh. And Ramza says he'll do nothing of the sort. So there's a little bit more back and forth, and Argath says a few more absolutely awful, unforgivable things, even talking about, like, gleefully claiming credit for killing Delita's sister and all that. It's just awful. So then we killed that dude for a second time. I remember when we started this game, somebody in my Discord said, the best thing about Final Fantasy Tactics is that you get to kill the worst bad guy twice. And then, in his dying words, he cries out for his mother. Which, I don't know how I'm supposed to feel about that.
Yeah.
Not bad for him, but sort of like, maybe if you'd thought more of your mother while you were alive, you wouldn't have been such an insufferable asshole. I don't know. Yeah. Of course, I don't know what Mom was like, so.
Yeah, but we don't know what his mother is like. Yeah. But you don't get pity just because you want it at.
No.
You have to earn it, right? Yeah. And especially right at the very end, like, no. Sorry.
So Ramza now, like, in full Berserker Barrage mode. Like, he's just fighting through scores of troops, and then superpowered humans, and then demons, and then people who've come back from the dead who are part demon, part ghost troop person. And he's just on a straight line to his sister. Damn it. It's incredible. Like, he's in a mode here. And he finally gets to the Undercroft and he cries out, Elmdor, you fight a battle already lost. Release Alma and end this vain struggle. He's done.
Yeah, that's some bold words from Ramza there.
Yeah. And then Elmdor just laughs and says, how can I release what I have never held?
God damn it.
There are but ghosts within these walls. I'm sorry, but the princess is in another castle.
You bastard.
Oh, man. If we didn't want to kill this month before.
No kidding. Gee whiz.
And Elmdor says, but far be it from me to turn away the one Beowulf to grace us with his presence. Then he takes out his magical rock.
Right.
And gets the purple blue lights. And like the fiends we have seen before, he turns himself into the full Lucavi version, a winged beast called Zalera, the Death Seraph.
Cool name.
Yeah. And I really like the design of the same character of the same name, but as a summon in Final Fantasy XII.
Right. Right.
Which these all are. And now as Zalera and Elmdor, whatever, Zalera says, it's confusing, here dying, join my legion of undeath, your blood, the roses on unhallowed graves. What if I don't wanna, though?
Right. No, that sounds like a bad thing.
Right. And then, as all of this is happening, remember Meliadul from before? We met her out in the field of battle, Isolud's sister, Falmarv's daughter, and apparently she's been trailing Ramza this whole time because we made some pretty trashy accusations about her dad.
Well, not unfounded, though.
As she is about to discover, because she very quietly enters the back of the room while all of this is happening, and she sees Elmdor turn himself into Zalera and start talking about blood on roses and unhallowed graves and stuff. And she goes, again, she realizes this is the work of the Oracite. This is what Ramza was telling her. And apparently in all of this, Ramza has time for an I told you so. He says, do you believe me now? Your brother Isolud learned this foul truth and died fighting it. She says, you speak true. My father, Falmarv, Does he know of this? And Ramza goes, I tried to tell you. And then Zalera interrupts, says, before me stands the seed of Fulmarv's loins? Gross.
Ew.
Why?
Don't talk about people like that.
That's a weird thing to call a person. He says, so much alike with brother Isolud, both heirs of fathers Numen unpossessed. Oh no.
Right.
The sire's flesh, a vessel without flaw. We're not seeds and loins. We're not vessels. Bruh. Human beings are not vessels. Meliadul says, my father is host to a demon? Zalair says, truth dawns within this child's naivete. Who once was hers, now kin, naught but woe. Let not such trifles weigh upon you now. Ere long you shall know darkness deeper still. Like, all right, dude, turn it down a notch, demon. So they keep fighting and fighting and fighting, and again, during these fights in Final Fantasy Tactics, there's apparently time for conversation, and near the end of the battle, Meliadul says, forgive me, Ramza. I took your words as false. I thought you for an enemy. Ramza says, I might have done the same in your place, but now let us avenge your brother's death. And together, they can fight off Lucavi. Some symbolism there as well.
Yeah, well, and we've talked about this before, like, our heroes are strong enough to fight off demons. But oftentimes it's when they come together, right, that they are strongest of all. And so, Meliadul being able to see the truth in front of her, understand it, and join with the good guys just makes the good guys that much stronger. And so I like that.
Yeah. And in his dying words, Zalera says, Hashmal, bring order here where I have failed. And he's engulfed by the purple light, leaving nothing but the stone behind. That's it for this episode. Thanks for listening, and thank you to everyone who's reached out to us. Let us know what we missed, got wrong, or should have mentioned by hitting us up on Twitter at FFWeeklyPod. Of course, you can find us on the Discord channel, or just leave a comment right here on patreon.com/FFweekly. Join us next time as we continue toward the finale of Final Fantasy Tactics.